And probably Okay, so welcome everyone to this celebration of the paperback edition of Some Strange Music. Thank you for coming out on this cold, rainy night. We're happy to have you here. My name is Greg Newton. I'm the co-founder, along with my beloved partner, Donnie Jokum, of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division. Thank you. And we're being helped by our volunteer, Kyle Katz, one of our longest-serving volunteers. So the Bureau is an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore that Donnie and I founded back in 2012, and we have been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. And as an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore, we are dependent on sales and donations to keep this boat afloat. So I'm gonna pass a bag around for donations. There's some change in the bag. We especially encourage people to make a donation if you know you won't be buying a book. But you're welcome to do both. There's also a QR code on the back if you'd like to give through Venmo, and anyone watching online can give through Venmo at BGSQD. Let's see. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that by the register, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our many upcoming events. Our regular hours are Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. and then we often stay open later when we have events such as this. Before I introduce Griff and Eileen, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement and we will get started. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a queer issue, and we encourage you to read our flyer in the back corner on why we feel it is important for queer people to speak out in solidarity with Palestinians. So, Griffin Hansbury, longtime friend of the Bureau, both of you are longtime friends of the Bureau. Griffin Hansbury is the author of Vanishing New York and Feral City as Jeremiah Moss. A Pushcart Prize and Stonewall Book Award winner, his writing has appeared in several publications, including N+1, The New York Times, The New Yorker, and Paris Review. He works as a psychoanalyst in Manhattan. Eileen Myles is a poet, novelist, and art journalist whose practice of vernacular first-person writing has made them one of the most recognized writers of their generation. Pathetic Literature, which they edited, came out in fall of 2022. A Working Life, their newest collection of poems, is out now. They live in New York and in Marfa, Texas. Please give them both a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Donnie, for having me here. It feels like being at home amongst family. And thank you, everybody, for coming out on this bitter April night. And it's good to see so many lovely, loving faces. And Eileen, I just want to give you a big thanks for doing this with me, and you've always been a supporter of my writing. I have a postcard from Eileen that you sent me, as a young poet. I would write to writers that I loved and send my work, and I got a postcard back from Eileen saying, you are a real poet. And I was probably like 22 when you sent that to me. So thank you for your support over the years and your friendship. So I'm gonna read for about 10 minutes and then we'll talk. So this is a novel and it's hard to sort of like, give you the whole story, but basically it takes place in 2019. The narrator is, you're getting some, so that's that. That's my breath, okay.
Yes, yeah.
Give it about 3 minutes.
Okay.
They wait till we start.
Yeah, I live with this all the time. My nervous system is, it's like, what, is that coming from inside of me? Or is it, so it takes place in 2019. The narrator is Max. He's a middle-aged trans guy who's gone back to his working-class small town in Massachusetts to work with his Trump-supporting sister Donna to empty out their mother's house after her death. He's also on sort of like sabbatical of sorts from his job as a high school teacher because he said the word tranny in class and has to see a sensitivity trainer. And while he's there, most of the book takes place in his recollection of 1984 when he was 13-year-old Melanie, who developed a friendship with a really fantastic young trans woman, and this sort of helped Mel/Max realize that he was queer and trans and all the things. And there's a lot of Patti Smith music. Patty and Debbie would be here tonight. So for this short chapter, Donna is the sister, Stetson is Donna's son, Melanie is Max's dead name, Jules is Melanie's best friend, Sylvia is the trans woman friend, and Ampleforth is the Ampleforth Academy where Max is being punished. Okay. So out in the living room, Donna is shouting into her phone. Every few days she makes the rounds of people who have wronged her. Stetson's lawyer, the NutriBullet people, a clerk at the Traffic Violations Bureau of the DMV, a financial counselor at the hospital where she owes money for the placement of a stent, and a customer service representative in India with an accent that sends my sister into a state of apoplexy. Now she's on with Jerry Loeb talking about the sale of the house. I don't want to hear it. Progressives, it's like. I'm in my old bedroom. Though my mother removed my posters and filled the space with her clutter of bankers' boxes and paper piles, enough relics of my youth remain to arouse a sense of time dilation, or maybe dislocation is the word. My Garfield phone still sits by the bed. I read an internet story recently about Garfield phones washing up on a beach in France. They arrive in pieces, cartoon cat heads, cords, and handsets, the bright orange wreckage of 1980s novelty. For 35 years, no one knew where the parts were coming from. Finally, le mystère des téléphones Garfield was solved when environmental activists climbed into a remote sea cave and discovered the source, a rusted shipping container run aground, leaking scraps of our non-biodegradable past. Similarly, in this house stuffed with memory, the girl comes back, but she does not come whole. Melanie, buried in a remote spot on the other side of an ocean, washes ashore in bits and pieces. It used to be painful to see the photos my mother kept on the walls, my former shape staring back from another dimension. Now enough time has passed that it feels like looking at someone you knew briefly but intensely, years ago, someone you forgot and then remembered, wondering, whatever happened to them? In a photo album from junior high, between Polaroids of Jules and me at Halloween parties and class trips to Rocky Point Amusement Park, I find a yellowed news clipping. A woman asks, my niece informs me after seeing Michael Jackson's Thriller on TV that Jackson takes female hormone pills to keep his voice pitched high. I feel that God simply blessed him with a good set of vocal cords. Which one of us is right? The columnist answers, you are. It's nothing at first, a random artifact, but I'm struck by the fact that at age 12, I preserved this transgender question under cellophane. That would have been at least a year before I began to know myself, before I met Sylvia. And this brings up the mystery of knowing, how we can know a thing without thinking it, and how that unthought knowledge leaves traces, fragments of the truth, before it's fully born. I want to think more about this, but it's time for my mandated session with the sensitivity trainer. At my old desk, I open my laptop. Through the stuttering Skype window, this is 2019, so Young and vigorous autumn biddle, endowed by the deans of Ampleforth Academy with the power to judge my fitness for duty, flashes a buoyant smile. She's the sort of woman I envied once and probably still do, a long and lean Anglo-Saxon with hair like a chestnut horse on a leafy day in New England. She belongs on a bale of hay, dressed in one of those Norwegian fisherman sweaters from L.L. Bean, the kind that only made me look lumpy and wrong. For each of our sessions so far, Autumn has appeared in a different room of her new construction home. I've seen the vaulted living room, the office, and a reading nook where the books are covered in white paper, spines left blank, as hygienic as a surgeon's smock. Today she's in her kitchen, a glittering expanse that would eat my mother's kitchen for breakfast. Where my mother left plaid wallpaper and chipped formica countertops, Autumn has installed gleaming subway tiles and white marble slabs. My mother's faded yellow fridge wheezes and shudders, while Autumn's, sheathed in stainless steel, stands as steady and unobtrusive as a servant. I bet it even makes ice cubes quietly, shitting out each frozen brick in a vaporous hush. Autumn tucks her hair behind her ears and flashes a rack of genetically superior teeth, eager to school me on the super diversity of genders. If my sister's overwhelmed by the idea of 15 genders, she'd have a conniption over Autumn's list, which runs into the triple digits and includes multigender, blur gender, and cloud gender. The prefixes multiplying, shifting into omnigender, astrogender, and chronogender, until prefix becomes suffix to make gender flux, gender fuzz, and gender mutt. What are your thoughts? Autumn asks, her smile showing a touch of strain. How did she get this job? She's trying her best, but she's out of her depth, and I take pleasure in neutralizing her. If I have to endure these so-called trainings, I'm at least going to make them interesting. Maybe you're thinking I'm a jerk and I should cut this woman some slack. You might be right, but what about my slack? I've never known the exquisite ease of being an Autumn. My thoughts are complicated, I say. All these words are trying to name the experience of non-binary gender, which of course is valid. I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, but in their limitless profusion, the labels risk devolving to the narcissism of minor differences. It's like the more gender expands, the more it produces these categories that require policing, who belongs and who doesn't. While these categories attempt to provide more space, they actually collapse it, don't you think? Autumn frowns. This is not the answer she's looking for. I just worry about a community that's more invested in hyper-individualism than, community, I say. People are individuals, Max. Everyone's unique. Are they, though? I'm very unique. I say, doubting Autumn's assertion of singularity. I don't tell her that unique is an absolute adjective and should not be modified. I'm a high school English teacher. I can't help it, but I do keep the thought to myself. Give me some credit. People have a right to define themselves however they want, she says. Yes, of course, that's not what I'm saying. Look, it's a problem of late-stage capitalism, this micro-slicing of differences, asserting all this uniqueness. It's good for consumerism, a different shampoo for every special head of hair, but it can lead to scapegoating, demonizing people for not being, whatever, the right sort of person. That's where political correctness goes awry. When the radical goes too far, it comes around the bend and turns conservative. There's probably a Venn diagram for that. You're mansplaining, Autumn says, tapping a note into her laptop, no doubt a demerit for her report to the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion. I'm a trans man, I say. If anything, I'm transplaining. Trans men are men, she insists. Autumn cannot permit the differences between trans men and cis men, like the people on Twitter who repeat this well-intentioned slogan. She thinks if she sees me as trans, different from cis, she'll undo my manhood. How did the expansion of gender lead us right back into the binary? Autumn cannot see me. She might see the man I am, but she can't see the rest. It isn't easy to explain, there's no good language for it, how a person can be one thing and also its apparent opposite without undoing the other. Most people don't have the capacity to imagine more than one gender in a single body. They can't juggle the cognitive dissonance. When they imagine my past, they either force me into being a real girl or they rewrite it, conjuring a boyhood that never happened, keeping my story coherent for themselves and splitting me in the process. For them, there was Mel and now there's Max, as if we aren't the same continuous person. Early in transition, I welcomed such revisionist history as affirmation, but at this point, the revision hits me as erasure. To be Max, Mel had to go away for a while, but it's one thing when I make that split, and another when others do it to me. My dissonance isn't yours to fix. I'd present it in one hand if I could, but I have to speak of myself in two parts to be legible, otherwise I dematerialize into blur gender, cloud gender, whatever, crypto gender. Is that a thing? It's probably a thing. I want all my parts to exist without one unraveling the other. Trans men are men, yes, but we're also something more. You sound like one of those angry white guys on Fox News, Autumn goes on, complaining about political correctness. Her comment stings. When my scandal spread beyond Ampleforth, right-wing media tried to weaponize me in their fight against political correctness. It happened around the same time that a high school teacher in Iowa lost his job for staunchly refusing to use a trans student's pronouns. He was the third teacher to get fired for that offense, and it stimulated an anxiety in America that Fox could not resist. The teacher went on TV and cited religious freedom. His lawyer said, "This is a prime example of the tyranny of the transgender agenda. We just want tolerance to be a two-way street." The Fox commentator called the misconduct a thought crime, invoking Orwell, while at the bottom of the screen, the chyron read, "Trans pronoun crackdown." When news of my situation spread, Fox invited me on. What could be better for their cause than a transgender teacher tyrannized by what they called the PC trans cult? I refused. My protest is not their protest, and the last thing this world needs is a trans man going on Fox to rail against political correctness. I didn't want to be misrepresented as a right-wing trans fundamentalist, the reactionary type that Trans Tumblr calls true scum, and I didn't want the Twitter death threats that would come with it. I stayed home with my cannabis gummies. The threats came anyway, thanks to that piece in the Boston Globe, and I was devastated to see them come almost entirely from trans people. The Trump administration was taking away our right to exist, but somehow they found time to write hate tweets to me. "Why don't you go kill yourself," they wrote, with their unicorn and rainbow emojis. "Why don't you put a noose around your neck and just do it already?" Autumn freezes on screen, her face distorted. I probably look distorted too on her side of the bad connection. The symbolism of this technological glitch is not lost on me. I wait to unfreeze, but we lose each other and cannot reconnect. I've had enough sensitivity for the day anyway. Thank you.
We gotta get our furniture together, right? We have, do you want this? I want an extra bench, yeah.
Like this?
Oh, just, okay.
Yeah, a little
Coffee table. There we go. Are you gonna stand?
No, do you want to stand?
No. I was like, oh no, I have it all figured out. And you're gonna stand.
No, I'm gonna sit.
Okay, here we go.
I'm gonna straddle this.
Yeah. Now we should just like settle down and be quiet for 2 minutes. Just
Good meditation.
So it's so funny, first of all, that was so amazing. I mean, I mean, listening to you, this is just so stupid. I feel like, I mean, I guess I just love literature, and I know you do too, and I could just listen to it all day, and I could listen to you read from this book. I could sit here and listen to you read the whole book. And that would be amazing for all of us. We'd bring our jammies and just kind of like have like Griffin,
Yeah.
I wonder how long, yeah,
Yeah.
that would
Be
be
a good
amazing.
event.
But we do this, which is so interesting. I think this is like a development in the history of public literary events, which is that it used to be always you would read, and then slowly it got to be, we'll have a conversation, and often people who invite you want you to read, like you'll go to Europe to read for 3 minutes. And I was like, fuck, what do you know? So I'm happy to hear you, but I think it's so interesting that we've moved to this place where we talk. You
Yeah.
know, how do you feel about that?
I like the talk, but it's a lot of work. You have to find somebody to talk to. And when you do these events, like the bookstores or whatever, they invite you, but they don't find anybody for you to talk to. And then if you're in another state, you don't know anybody there.
And they were like, who, do you know
Who do
somebody?
you know? Do you know somebody? And then you say, well, I know this person, well, but do you know a draw? Right? Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
You probably don't get, I need a draw. You're my draw.
Yeah, people want somebody local, they always want somebody that will bring in.
Yeah, which makes sense, yeah.
And you weren't there, but Jack was there, we went to, it was so interesting, Maggie Nelson had a conversation with the famous couples counseling, Orne, yeah, and huge crowd. And it was so interesting to watch, I was thinking about us talking because it was so interesting to watch Maggie be in couple counseling timing on stage, because of course Orna is like, huh. And she just, she just took her space in that, and plus she was very hot. So it was kind of an amazing thing, but in this, you are a therapist.
I am.
So it's kind of interesting that we're sort of, huh? Did you say, huh?
Huh.
Exactly, thank you, yeah, so do that to me, and I'll keep reminding me that that's what's going on here, because I think it's strange that it's like, so in this case, you're the subject, which is different.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah, sure.
But you do have, like, there you go, like, I know, anything you're gonna look at me in a really sincere way, and I was like, is it okay that I feel this way?
Probably make you cry if I try.
That's incredible. That's so Silence of the Lambs. The Hannibal Lecter skills of a
Speaking
therapist.
of the bad trans object, right? Silence.
I know this. Because originally I had a strategy. I just thought, because we're good friends, we've known each other for years, I thought I would just play dumb. And I thought, why not? I can just ask any stupid question there is. And so I just thought the first question was like, where did you get this title? But then I made the stupid mistake of reading the Reader's Guide, which quickly answered my question. And then I thought, my strategy is gone. But I have to admit, even though this is well, you can answer the question nonetheless. It's a Patti Smith song. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a great title.
Yeah. It's a lyric from a Patti Smith song.
Where? You don't have to sing unless you want to.
Dancing Barefoot.
But go ahead.
Some strange music draws me in.
Like that.
Yeah, like
Okay, yeah. I actually didn't know the lyric because I thought that's kind of William Carlos Williams so it's very validating of Patti Smith's poethood.
And she gave permission for me to use it, but she said, like, it's not my permission to give, it's just out there in the world, and it doesn't belong to me.
Patti.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I think, was this a working title, or did you slap it on late?
The title I was originally going with was, now I can't remember. There was another one.
Good.
Yeah.
It's just, the superior title erased the inferior.
Yes, exactly.
That's kind of
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah. Well, here's what I found myself with really, I have many questions.
Impossible objects.
Oh, no, that's so therapist. That's like, that would be a mistake, I think. Yeah, good thing. Thank you, Patty. My directions are sort of, perhaps they're all gonna be linked, but I don't see the linkages. They're just all good questions, I think. Because I do wanna talk a little bit more about what we're doing, because the whole question of why people are having conversations all the time instead of readings. And do you think it's a lonely time?
And I think it is, I think it is. People sort of blame the pandemic, but I think it was the loneliness. It's an alienated time for sure, right? I think a lot of people feel not in community. And this is something, right, it's sort of, my character jokes about late stage capitalism, but that's a late stage capitalism problem, right?
Yeah.
That we're supposed to be alienated from each other. And I think it's also—
We're supposed to be, you mean as shoppers or something?
Yeah, sure. The more connected we are, the less sort of consuming we're gonna do, and less violence we might do to each other too, right? But I think it's also a time that's hard to think, right? So maybe the longing is like two people are gonna sit up here and think together. And maybe that's something people wanna watch.
And have a friendship perhaps.
Yeah.
Because it's weird, I grew up in the, 50s and 60s and watched TV and there was talk shows all the time. It was the most normal thing in the world, like every famous writer was on talk shows. It was just kind of, people were smoking pot, they were smoking cigarettes, they were saying fucked up shit.
Yeah.
You just learn so much from talk
Yeah.
shows, and they sort of don't exist in that same way anymore. Like the public Gore Vidal and Truman Capote, they're all on TV.
Yeah. I watched, in the process of writing this, I watched a Patti Smith interview with, I think, who was she talking to? One of those guys, right? And she just comes out and her clothes are ripped and she puts her feet up on the guy's desk, and she's just like, just wild and nasty and great and sort of vulgar and this sort of like, also her gender was really, really interesting too. She had this real tomboy energy and, but yeah, that was one of the examples. You could go on and just sort of be this, you didn't have to be proper.
Right. But that, how long ago was that? You're not saying?
That was what, the 70s?
Then.
Yeah.
Not, I was gonna say,
now, 70s,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Huh. Well, here we are.
Here we are, doing this conversation.
So, okay, here's where my biggest, this is such, I'm here because we're all friends, and I will say that too. I know your poetry. Do you still write poetry?
I don't know.
It
just stopped.
Yeah.
I wrote a novel after 9/11 and somehow.
Not this.
Not this one, no.
Yeah.
And somehow the poetry just stopped. I still don't understand it.
Oh, that's so weird. It could come back.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of like a virus.
Yeah. I think it's in.
Seriously.
Yeah. Like it's dormant, waiting to be awakened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
Yeah. I think of poetry when I'm writing prose, I think about the music of a line. I often read it out loud to myself. I'm thinking about alliteration and the rhythm of something. Yeah, so it's in there.
Yeah. Literally, it's just like one of my favorite lines. I have to admit, and I don't want to make it too much about literally us, but, we're both from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of planted Massachusetts things, town parades. Maybe there are town parades everywhere, but there's something about town parades in Massachusetts. And we even had Paul Revere at our parade, he's some dude on a horse. But you do, it's like the poet, the mother yells at the narrator, you got it made in the shade. Your life is
Okay, cakewalk.
Yeah. And it was just
Did you
like,
hear that?
huh?
Were you told your life is a cakewalk?
No, it was always like, you're always out there gallivanting. I was like, what the fuck is gallivanting?
In your dungarees.
Huh?
In your dungarees.
In your dungarees. Right.
Yeah.
But it's like you got
Put on a pair of slacks. Right?
But it's totally the poetry of the interior. It's the poetry of inside the house. It's it's domestic poetry, and it's like, I think that's one of the things I love about this book is you have such an ear for that. It constantly rolls that way. But I wanted to. Can you do the simple, obvious thing? What is this? Okay, so what is the story? So there was the poet you, and then Jeremiah Moss happened how? Do you all guys all know Jeremiah Moss? Yeah, amazing. And of course, Feral City is another of my favorite books.
I love that book too. Jeremiah Moss happened because I wrote a novel that did not get published with a character named Jeremiah Moss that was a lot about memory and the city and sort of speculative fiction kind of thing. And then I just really liked writing in that voice. That voice is a part of me, and so I gave the character a blog one night. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do a blog. And I put it together probably in like 5 minutes, and it just kind of happened. It just sort of took off, and other bigger blogs picked it up, and then it just kept going and going and going, and I kept it going for 10 years, and somehow managed to keep my identity under wraps behind that pen name for 10 years. And then when I wrote the book, I decided to come out. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of amazing that the novel produced a character that didn't get published, and then the character walked out of the book and produced a podcast and got a gig and became, I mean, I guess I want to say that's very poetic, that it's sort of like the novel is held the character too tightly.
Right.
And the character needed to go out and have their own,
Yeah.
performance or their own
Walk
thing.
around. And,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For sure.
It's kind of amazing. You constructed something bigger than a novel.
And unintentionally, right?
Yeah.
Like those things that you want to make something happen and it doesn't happen and you're hitting your head against a brick wall, and then the thing that you don't really quite mean to happen is the thing that works.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's. So how did this happen?
This happened because there's a scene in there where Mel meets Sylvia, the trans woman, for the first time, or sees her for the first time outside of the post office. And that was a moment from my life when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And that memory was sort of nagging at me, and it had to become a novel.
I don't want to ask the gross question, but I have to because I am being dumb tonight.
Yeah.
So there was a model for Sylvia.
There was, so I grew up in this very small, working class, Trumpy town. I mean, that back then it was Reagan town. And there was, people would start saying like, have you seen the tranny? Have you seen the tranny? Using this word. And I hadn't, but I felt something exciting.
And you're 12 or 13.
12 or 13, yeah. And I was riding in the car with my best friend and her mother, and we were passing the post office, this little squat cinder block building, with the American flag and all that stuff, and the 2 blue boxes outside. And my best friend's mother points out the window and goes, there's the tranny. And I looked, and it was this very plain woman with a brown leather purse, mailing a couple of letters. And she mailed the letters, and then she walked behind the post office. And if you were walking back there, it meant that, I assumed it meant she lived back there. So I would get on my bike and look for her, not knowing what I was doing or why I would be looking for this person. And I never found her, and that's the end of the story for me. And I thought, well, that's the what if. What if a kid like me had found this person? What would this person have introduced me to before I got there? In that place where there were no books, there was some strange music is the virus, right, that gets into the small town. I mean, it's why the Republicans are doing what they're doing, because we are viral and we do get into small towns and we do wake people up. And, right. So they don't, so that has to stop. But so it's imagining what would have happened if that virus had come into my life at that age.
Right. It's so interesting though that prohibitive moment, like the buzz, like there's a tranny, and there's the tranny, and that it's so exciting. It's pure. I mean, that's like it's lust, it's desire, it's pornographic, it's all those levels. And it's weird that we don't get to, as people on the other side, we don't get to use that. I mean, I guess we do. We live those lives. Their prohibitions direct us towards, censorship. I remember as a Catholic, I remember that with the Legion of Decency, there was a column in the Catholic newspaper about the movies that were condemned. And it was, and we all made it our business to see everything. But we knew the Catholic Church introduced us to Bridget Bardot. It was like, they were like, here, kids.
Yeah, there's that excitement in not permission, but there is a permission that comes out of that prohibition, right? I mean, I'm thinking about being a young dyke, pre-trans identity in high school with my girlfriend and going to the movies, we would hold hands down under the seats, like where nobody could see. And when everybody walked by, we would stop holding hands, But it was terrible in some ways, and also incredibly exciting and sexy and all those things. And you felt like an outlaw, and here we are, outlaws again, I guess, right?
Right. It's not that we don't have the experience.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So you had the moment, so you identified a speck of a story. And then, I mean, I just like, to my mind, I think of you, well, obviously you're a writer, but also I think of you as a shrink. So you know a lot of, like, because now you've got to make up this relationship.
Right.
You've got to make up this history, you've got to make up this character. How did that happen? Actually, what's the timeline? I mean, I'm very fetishistic about how books grow. You know, like, hey, from the moment of to the moment of this coming out. And
Right.
how long was that?
And you know what?
Because I think there's a lot of writers here who would.
I forget all that. I like
Literally?
dissociate it, yeah, I don't know, it's like,
I'm so
Yeah.
sick. I'm the opposite. I'm like writing the dates down, but yeah.
yeah.
Huh.
It's, some of it's in my journal, I've been
Yeah.
like a compulsive diarist since I was probably 12 years old, so
Yeah.
I've written all these things down, but to remember it is difficult.
Yeah.
But I started writing it in 2017, and I placed the current day in 2019, and then I got an agent and I finished it up in 2020, and it went out to editors in March of 2020. They all rejected it.
Killer moment.
Yeah, it was really good timing. And it was rejected by all of them, and then I wrote Feral City during lockdown and sold that, and then my editor, now that I had an editor, he bought this novel. So Feral City enabled, so Jeremiah Moss also enabled this book.
Amazing. Oh my
Yeah.
God, a working dude.
Yeah.
So Feral City was a successful book. Did it sell?
No.
It was like a can opener to the other book. Yeah.
No, flopped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about success as a writer? I mean, I think it's sort of like, it's also relative, right? We're sitting here looking at this book, you're a success, you know?
Yeah, no, I
But-
don't feel like one at all. I'm deeply bitter. Yeah. No, it's a constant
Yeah,
bitterness. Yeah.
Huh, interesting. I mean, I say like I've never, me too, you know? But it's so interesting because it looks so good and and
It looks great from the outside.
And what
it's
it-
not nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, when the paperback came out, I was like, I want to reread it in the paperback. There's something about
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you read your book in hardcover and then the paperback comes out, it's like, you get to read it again in another body.
right.
And I was reading it, I was like, this is like, I'm really fortunate that I got to make of my kind of shitty youth, my difficult youth, something that I think is really beautiful, and how lucky I am that I can do that,
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I try to, in my bitterness, I go, okay, that's success.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, but also just writing a really great book, which I mean, I think that like it's one of the books that I know I go around saying, read this book, you've got to read this book, because it's so, and it's, do you know who Tom Perrotta is?
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of these,
Children and, yeah.
I went to this literary festival, the Key West Literary Festival, and it's just like, and these things are so weird because you're with the weirdest crew of people. They were like, they couldn't believe they were there with me. I was like, do you read my work? But I was like, I can't believe I'm here with you. And he was the guy that wrote The Leftovers and Election and all these, like everything he writes turns into a movie or a TV show, And it's like, and he was a great guy. I really loved him, but it was really funny. He was like, among all the writers, he had what everybody wanted, which was movies and TV, and it was all these other kinds of writers who were very good writers. He'd be in the pool and you could all see all the writers kind of going towards him, just like that, And I think we had a Boston, he was from Boston, he lived in Boston, and he was a good guy, so we kind of connected, so I thought, I'll read his book. And it was so, I read like Leftovers, it was so interesting because it was dumb. It wasn't bad. You know what I mean? It was like a smart person wrote a dumb book. And
That's the key.
yeah.
Success.
Yeah. No, it was kind of, and it was also, you couldn't stop reading it, but it was, and the life was very well built, except that its reality had to go to another dimension, because this couldn't be it. It just, you felt plunged. The book was over and you were still panting, because the book hadn't happened yet in a weird way. And I am going to strike a parallel with your book, which is so interesting because even as you were reading and I was just listening to you and thinking and feeling and watching people's reactions and stuff, there's so much payoff in this book. And on the other hand, I feel like it's light and certain at the same time. The tone, it's sort of like you have the time, like these things you say about growing up, you know, queer and trans in Massachusetts and class, and it's sort of like, and we all know that story, except we don't, you know, because there's so many micro moments of it, and yours are so fucking smart. You know, it's like that thing where we first, you know, when we first had, I can't even think of what apparatus I'm talking about, when you would, you know, you would raise your wand over a text and it would be bubble balloons and it would be footnotes that would tell you more things. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
I think
The
Where-
wand over and the bubbles?
you know, sometimes on our computers it does that.
Yeah.
Somebody described this function. It's like clouds. It's almost like footnotes on the page, kind of. Do you know?
No.
No. I thought somebody was
Sort of like
you're
an
just gonna go for a
annotation.
book. I thought you were gonna, I've got that right here. But I think it is part of, I mean, it's sort of a part of reading a book on your computer, that you can kind of like look things up. You don't
Right.
have to go to another location. It's like, it's right there.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, but yours, it just, the bubbles are all built in, you know, it's sort of like, it's kind of mundane coming of age thing written by a really smart person. So that you're kind of injecting all the politics of it. And I mean, you do this in Feral City too. It's just like, we're just getting this report of what it was like during the pandemic, and suddenly the person was really queer, and suddenly we're in this completely very extreme political reality that the reader didn't necessarily expect to get. And I think that you do that, you kind of bait and switch by the mundanity of this.
I like that.
Yeah.
That was one of those
Well, so while you were writing, I mean, obviously, this is, one is writing with their consciousness.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like,
Yeah.
because were you trying to write a convention? I mean, did you feel like you were writing a book that was good for people? Did you want to share? I mean,
I hope so, yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things I'm often doing in this book is writing about absence, right? So, and I think a lot of transness, queerness, but trans masculinity in particular is marked by absence and the unrepresented and the unknowable. There's something about that really fascinates me and sort of haunts me. So trying to write about like what's not there, right? So that experience of
and what's not there?
what's not there is it's a really good question, right? Like,
You were gonna slide right over, what's not there? What are you talking about?
what is not there? I mean, I think that's hard to answer, because the not there is hard to say what's not there, right? It's invisible. There's a lot of invisibleness around trans masculinity. And
I mean, a truism in my head about trans masculinity is that there's much more interest in passing than there is in trans women. Is that true?
more interest in passing.
Well, I think trans men are, there's no like, hey, you know, I think there's much
That's
more
what's not
like,
there.
I'm just a
Yeah.
regular guy now.
Right. I mean, it's the thing about
Which
masculinity,
you may,
right?
which you interestingly acknowledge as something you don't always want
Right.
as a person and as a writer, which I always find interesting. What were you gonna say?
Well, it's that conflict, right? Like passing for cis comes with a whole lot of privilege and safety and ease, right? I can walk down the street and people aren't clocking me as trans. So I don't get the harassment and I don't get the looks and the potential violence, right? And I also don't get to be seen. I get seen as something that I don't really identify as. And so.
Are you alone in that perception, do you
No, I
think?
don't think so.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think a lot of people feel that way in some ways, right? It sort of like oscillates. It's an oscillating experience.
Have you ever been, now I'm just getting really nosy, have you ever been in a support group for trans men? Do you talk as a group about?
Years
stuff?
ago, in the early 90s, I was in the saddest support group ever. It was like, so it was the early 90s, so we were really sad, right? Because we were trans. And it was like, so I mean, back then it was like the sort of rule was if you transitioned, you were to go stealth. You were to possibly break off from everybody you knew, and you were to blend in as a cis-het man in the world, and that was the end of it. And so all these, it was this group of very working class guys. There was like a welder, there was a fishing boat captain. This is on Bleecker Street before all the shops came in. And it was it was really, everybody was depressed. And there was a guy who drove a limousine, and it was weird. And then there was one guy who recently visited, a friend of mine from England. He and I transitioned together. We were the only two who had gone to college and had a sort of queer identity and had some sort of.
Is this the guy
theory.
that I met recently?
Yeah.
Jake.
Yeah, Jay.
Oh,
And that's okay. And we really connected. And then I went out of that group and then went stealth, did the thing you're supposed to do, and then it was too oppressive for me. And then I went back and I found another group, and somehow in the course of 5 years, the culture of trans masculinity had already started shifting. And people were identifying in different ways, people were much more out, there was a lot less sadness.
But I do think what this book is a repository of a lot of those feelings and moments.
Yeah, for sure.
I felt like I was learning a lot reading this about all.
Yeah, and that experience of like the absence, right, of trying to figure out like what am I in the absence of any representation whatsoever. There's very little transmasculine representation now, but in 1984, I mean, no, there's nothing, and there's no internet. So, the kid like I did goes through the card catalog at the local library, in which there's also nothing. There's Jan Morris's Conundrum. That's it.
Yeah.
And
which is a great and fucked up book.
Right. Like probably every trans book written in the past, in the future this will be a great fucked up book someday, probably.
That's like an ambition.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
We could, I'm trying to think if I have anything, because we could go to you guys.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
So I'm curious about, your experience in terms of your gender and your masculinity in Massachusetts, and, did you feel like reflected in this in some way? Did it,
yeah, entirely. Yeah. And yet in so many, I mean, like I felt reflected in so many of, I think being from a different generation, I mean, so many of the characters, I felt like I was performing different bits of that female character, that male character, that queer character. I didn't have a queer, I had a queer interior, but I didn't have a queer experience as a young, I was like this hidden thing in that same climate. So it was very felt.
like that knowing but not knowing, having that, there's gotta be a word for that, right? A word for that sort of knowledge that is not yet knowledge about oneself.
Right. I'm sure there is. Jack, you would know that word.
Epistemology of the closet.
What did you say?
Epistemology of the closet.
Amazing.
Longing.
There it is.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Longing.
Because it was such pre-experience, like, I mean, dreams. I mean, when I think about the vivid sex dreams I had when I was in high school, and I was like, whose life is this about? I was just like, where do I file this? I had a full-on sex life, as with cheerleaders. It's like, and nobody to tell it to. It was very strange, but yeah. So.
Was that like a disturbing experience for you, or?
Yeah, it was both great and disturbing. Yeah. So I think I was probably very busy and more in the halls of homophobia, constructions of, being against it.
Right.
I mean, not actively, I wasn't out, beating up queers or anything, but
No.
but it was like really very reactive about anything. I mean, I was seeing suggestions of my queerness when nobody was even saying that.
I
was thinking that's what people were saying.
They were saying about you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's what I was saying about me, but it was like,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Did you go like full femme at some point? Were you?
Every now and then, yeah, every now and then, but it was just like nobody would buy it. I had a law that any piece of clothing that I saw both genders wear, I could wear. It was sort of, you know, I mean, like that was my fashion move, you know?
Right.
It was sort of like, it had to be validated by both. Then I could, you know, if I didn't, you know, I could wear this male piece of clothing, if I saw another girl wear it.
Right.
Then I was like, okay.
So you
know.
could both hide and exist at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would do collective things. I would try and get all the girls to put on for masculine. Let's all do butch for Halloween.
Right.
Like organized it, you know? Madras ties and pinstripe shirts with tab collars. I mean, I was just like, made everybody do it. And I was like, great, yeah. It was like putting on a Jewish star or something, you know? It was like, we're safe here.
Right,
You know?
right. Sure. Halloween was the great liberatory holiday, right?
Right, it was the holiday of the closet.
Yeah. For sure.
So what about you guys?
Questions, thoughts? Yes, Christine.
Are you writing another book? Are you in the process?
I'm so blocked lately. I mean, I wrote a little essay that's this sort of weird stream of consciousness thing, and I wrote something for a psychoanalytic journal about sort of trans negativity and during Trump and how Trump is actually sort of like in his attack on linking the links that we have to think trans. Trans people are sort of responding in this sort of like pugilist, to use a term from Jack right here, sort of attitude of sort of like againstness, which is really exciting, like coming out of the normativity of the past years. So I wrote that, but everything feels like little and light and sort of like, not really writing. But yeah, no, I'm not. I would love to be writing a book, but I can't sink in, you know. Maybe poetry will come back, because poetry you can sort of just jump into and jump out of, and you sort of don't have to.
When you're stuck, poetry comes forward, I think, a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, Mike.
The town is so vivid, it's scary how vivid it is. I was curious if you went back and did you go back and kind of soak it up again? And along with that, maybe tell me about the scenes of Sylvia's life in Boston and where that came from in your life and what you were drawing upon.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, the town, definitely inspired by the town that I grew up in, and I go back there at least once a year. And
Why?
my mother's still there,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, it's a little rough. There's a Trump flag in my mother's front yard, and
Did she put it there?
yeah, yeah. She doesn't take it home. I take it down when I go home, which I think she should. But we don't talk about that at home. So yeah, it's all there, and there's Trump. I mean, there's Trump flags all over the town.
Will you name the town?
Avon.
No.
Nobody's ever. It's actually not on maps. It's so small.
It's not on maps?
Not on. It doesn't appear on many maps. Yeah. It's about 20 minutes out of Boston, but it's like, I mean, Boston was there, but it was like another planet, you know. Sylvia's life in New York, her sort of.
I'm thinking of Boston just as, I'm halfway through, so this is where so when Max gets a haircut.
Oh, they go into Harvard Square.
Yeah, it's just the way that Boston was, just reminded me so much of
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah, I mean, Harvard Square in the 80s, I mean, that was my first East Village, which is where I've lived in New York for 30-some years, you know, like, but Harvard, I mean, back then, it was like you went to
Nini's.
Nini's.
It was like all
I would
these.
get Lucy's at Nini's for 25 cents and just buy one cigarette, right? At Nini's Corner, and like, you know, there was the pit where all the punk kids hung out, and the Tasty
The
diner.
Tasty, I worked there.
You worked at the Tasty?
So that's, yeah, that was the first. drag queens I ever worked with.
I mean, it was amazing, yeah, yeah. It was a real place, and it was a place where if you were a weirdo in that area, you went to Harvard Square and that was it. That was the only place you really wanted to be, right? In the 80s certainly. And now it's just like, I mean, all this other shit, you know, it's the Tasty is a CVS and Nini's is, I think they were one of these sort of hipster cake, they sell a cake called crack pie, and they got in trouble for calling it crack pie because crack is bad and racist. But it's that kind of place, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it didn't stay.
no.
It didn't stay.
So yeah, that's where you'd go, and you'd go to thrift stores and get your thrift store shit and your books and your records and magazines and, yeah.
It's like this passionate erasure of the I mean, it's sort of like, this is what your work is about in so many ways. I mean, with the Jeremiah Mossy and with this novel, but this erasure of the underclass and the specific details that are portals into other realities so that we can travel, you know,
Absolutely.
and suddenly that flatness that's reconstructed everywhere.
Yeah, it's that, you know, that normalization that takes away, again, back to the thinking, right? You can't think. If you're surrounded by chainsaws, you can't actually think.
It's an anti-dream space.
Yeah, totally. It's very closed, right?
What did you say?
That's what we're in. At least I wake up feeling that a lot
Yeah,
these days.
yeah,
Not my whole life.
in an anti-dream space, yeah.
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 That's a good way to describe it.
They're attacking our psyches.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Your mind.
And again, that's why I think this book is so rich, because of all these tiny moments just hold all those spaces and cherish them in this way, you know? It was sort of, this person's journey was through that funk and those accidents, and it's so remarkable. And also, you end, at the end of the book is amazing. Have you guys, how many people have read this book? A lot of, yeah. The awesome ending, right? Because they have the beautiful encounter, and it's just like, they're like, yes, no, like what, it's like looking, it's not perfect, it's sort of tossed off in this lovely way, where it's sort of like, we made it, she says, taking my hand, we got away. Because your character, the narrator, is saying how their small actions had created this total disaster in this person's life, you know? Sort of, kind of, and they just like, they just push it aside and do, we made it, she says, taking my hand, we got away, that's enough. You know, and just brings us into the liberatory present,
Yeah.
you know, which is so great. It really, I love a book that it doesn't cling to the reader, it sends the reader out, you know, with, you know, together, you know. You guys, yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So, Max like clearly feels sort of like a bitterness towards the younger, like his niece who comes out as non-binary, and it's just like, oh yeah, whatever, like he doesn't need or she doesn't, they don't need a Sylvia. I'm curious, just like, to what extent do you feel like, oh man, like I'm so jealous of the kids who can just like be like, oh, I'm non-binary, and everyone's like, yeah, cool,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I absolutely envy that. I mean, that is incredible. And what I see, like I see in my young patients who are trans and queer, non-binary, like they have such an incredible sense of, and I'm gonna say entitlement, not in a positive way, like healthy entitlement. Their parents fuck up their pronouns and they correct them. I never corrected my mother. Like that would not happen, you know? They expect to be seen, and that's amazing. I mean, just like the change, right? So I envy that internal strength and sureness, and everything that's gone into enabling that to happen. Absolutely.
Do you still struggle with the internal sureness?
Probably, yeah, sure, yeah. Not like I used to, but yeah. Though, you know, that old stuff never goes away. You know, I don't really believe in healing. I'm a therapist. I don't believe in healing. It changes, you know? It can soften, it can change shape, it can become useful in ways, it can do all kinds of things, but it never goes away.
No, do you want it to, really,
Right,
right?
right.
Because you were somewhere and you are somewhere and you've
Yeah,
got a history, it's very real.
I think we're told to want to. We're told to want to heal and get better.
Yeah,
Right.
but that's like Harvard Square,
Yeah,
right? Get rid of the tasty,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know, this person,
So I feel very taken care of by your narrator or your narrators, I would say, and I'm wondering, and as a cis woman, and there's not any reason that you would need to write that way, but I wonder if that's just the psychoanalyst in you or the way you are, or whether you put effort specifically into trying to take care of the reader and make them feel safe.
Would you mind telling me more about how you feel safe or what, if you can?
So, the subject of trans identities is relatively unknown to me, but it's easy for me to read what you write, and it's not necessarily like I sometimes worry, oh, I'm gonna fuck up somebody's pronouns, and I have fucked up people's pronouns and
Sure.
feel like shit about it.
Everybody
but
fucks up everybody's pronouns.
So I guess when I pick up literature that's focused on queer people or by queer people, I'm, I guess, concerned about how that literature is gonna treat me, or whether I'm gonna feel othered
Yeah.
in
so-
a way
so-
by it, and
right.
I haven't felt that way reading you.
Mm.
And maybe it's just my own preconceived notion that I'll be that way, but I just feel that.
I'd like to think I'm really empathic, right? Sort of like, and I want everybody to come in to
Yeah.
my book and like, I'd love to hear that,
Yeah.
and so thank you for that. I'd love to hear, like, I've had a lot of older lesbians tell me that this book they really saw themselves in this book, and I love that. And I've had, there was this straight cis guy who wrote for like an online magazine called The Good Man Project, which I was like, what the fuck is this? It actually is like good men. And he was like, I don't know why I'm really into this book by this trans guy, but I really felt like it got me because I'm on the autism spectrum, and I felt like a different kind of person, and this really got difference, and I just, so I'm like, that's great. Like, lots of people can come into this and see themselves and feel welcomed in, so, yeah, thank you.
I just wanna go back to that point about, what it's like to be a younger trans person versus an older trans person. And, I'm a social worker here at the center, and so I work with a lot of young, I don't know, I was just thinking, the thing you were saying, I also noticed like there's this, I like your language, positive entitlement, but I'm also wondering if or what I see is there's like a new kind of, I don't know, it's like this entitlement is it coming from this healthy place, or I wonder if it's actually like this fighting is so relentless that they have to do because, and this assertion of who they are is just like so attacked because of the visibility, right? Like they get to post on Instagram and then all these people get to write these hateful comments, and in this way that when we were young, I'm young, I'm 40, but I also didn't have any trans people in my life, and that's kind of like relieving. Like sometimes I'm like, God, thank God. I didn't have an Instagram account when I was like 19, like it was horrible. So I don't know, I guess I just wanted your thoughts and reflections on both like what's so great about that visibility, but then also what's like this new level of just like, I think attacking our psyches because we're saying who we are more.
Yeah, I mean, with visibility comes this violent backlash that we're in, right? I mean, when I changed all of my documentation in the 90s, I was under the radar. Nobody was making laws against me because nobody knew I existed. They didn't care about trans people. So, I have to believe that we're gonna move through the backlash into a better place. I'm gonna have to believe that as depressed and anxious and terrorized as I currently am.
Yeah, I
yeah.
know other people feel this like wistfulness about the invisibility. I'm like,
Yeah,
part of me feels like that there was a freedom there,
Yeah,
and now we have to, assert all these ways we are, just
right,
that's
and
expected of us.
yeah, and the part that I find so heartbreaking, which I do write about, in the book, is how trans and queer people attack each other, and it's like, geez, I mean, like, we're like, just like these, especially little, like, they're just like coming out of the egg, and it's just like, can you stop with it? Like, give each other a break. The identities are just forming and need space, and, so.
I've never had this experience before. When I read the book, I just started to be like, oh, I can just see this as a movie or a TV show. And it was so vivid, both, I am from Massachusetts, so. But also that feeling, I was like so struck by that feeling of the team where you see something that you're like, oh, can I escape through that? Like, it just really felt like universally meeting someone. So I'm like, is that something that's in the works?
A movie.
I said to my friend, can I say I want to option that book? And she's like, that means you have money to make a movie.
I am in conversation with a trans filmmaker who is interested. Those things often don't happen. Like I had this deal once with HBO to develop a series based on my transition, and I was like, this was years ago, I thought, this is it. I'm gonna cash it, this is gonna be the moment, and of course it doesn't happen, so I say that and yeah.
As a fellow psychoanalyst, I think I had the fantasy for years that we would written as Jeremiah Moss, who's a way to be kind of like closeted as a psychoanalyst, and is also writing out in the world. And I love the story tonight and Eileen's framing of it about Jeremiah Moss jumping out of the novel. But I was just curious. I mean, to me, it felt so interesting that you became Griffin Hansbury for like possibly your most personal book so far. I wondered if you could talk at all about what it's been like to be a psychoanalyst who's written something that can be read as autofiction or has threads of that.
Yeah, I thank you. That when I started the blog, I was working as a social worker at Callan Lord, and I worked there for many years. And I definitely, when you first train and you sort of start being a professional, you're like, I have to hold the frame, and nobody can know anything about me, and and then you get over that. So I've gotten over that. I guess that's kind of the short answer. Yeah. But it was really freeing to have a pen name. Like I could sort of, often because like Jeremiah, like I could just be very black and white in my opinions, which was really a relief. I didn't have to be like, well, but I know, so that was nice, and so it was psychologically freeing, and it did keep a distance from my professional life as I was building my professional life and building my practice and all of that. So now it's, like we say, it's all grist for the mill, right? So patients encounter these books sometimes they read them, sometimes I don't want to read it. I had a patient once who walked into a bookstore and saw, I think it was Vanishing New York, I can't remember, and they were like, they felt intruded upon. They were in their neighborhood bookstore, and there I was, where I was not supposed to be. So just talk about that.
It's so interesting how it's as a novel, it's so you and it's so not you at the same time, and that's so rich. I mean, I always think of who was the politician who was a governor of New Jersey or something who was busted as being gay. Do you remember? McGreevy? Yeah, and then he came out with a big memoir, and I met somebody who knew somebody who ghost wrote the memoir. And they told me that he had no memory. When they went to interview him, he had no memory of his adolescence or he had nothing. And so the person who wrote it said, well, I got paid $500,000 for selling my emotional history.
Oh my God.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
But in a weird way, this is no different. You know what I mean? It's sort of like it's you, but it's not you. It's sort of like you heard a million stories, you know, you've read a million books, and it's sort of like there's no, you know, I mean, it's so funny to think of a client who would want a trigger warning on a bookstore, you know, because your book is there or something.
Right.
But that's not you any more than in a weird way, this isn't you,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah. It makes me think of, you know, my mother thinks that she knows everybody in the book, like, this is your brother, and this is so-and-so, and this is, but that mother, that's not me. She's terrible. And everybody before, you know, they were like, what is your mother gonna think? Your mother's gonna see, like, right, you know, and I'm like, my mother is gonna see herself in this book. She has the power to just completely split that off. So I knew it was not gonna be a problem.
While you were writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Are we there? Here's a final question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if your bitterness and your narrator's bitterness and like cynicism has anything to do with you stopping poetry?
Are you a poet? Are you a poet? Worse.
I didn't want that to be an insulting question, but it was like, yeah.
No, my bitterness predates. It's always been.
Okay.
I can attest. Bitter for decades.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. On your books in the back, Griff will be happy to sign them, I take it.
Yes?
Yes, excellent. So buy some books. Good night, online audience.